You might be the best at everything, but you can't grow a business if you're doing everything. Understanding the big picture, if you want it to be a real business, not be a job, it needs to be something where the business can run without you.
Welcome to Solo to CEO. We're sitting here with Gershon Morgulis. Gershon, tell me what you do.
I run a company that provides fractional or part-time CFOs to growing businesses. We work for CEOs, sometimes CFOs, and we help them make better, more informed business decisions.
Now, why is it so important for a business to have a fractional CFO? Let's say a small to medium-sized business.
So when a business reaches a certain point, things get complicated, and business owners typically went into business to do something specific. Usually they're really good at, let's say, marketing. So they start a marketing company. That doesn't mean they're good at management. That doesn't mean they're good at finance. That doesn't mean they're good at anything but marketing. So, and that applies, same for attorneys, same for many other fields. So what we find is that at a certain point, the business owner finds that they're kind of functioning as the CFO, and it takes some time. But when the business reaches a certain point, which we can discuss, I don't know what that is, but then they need somebody who's going to fill that role. And that may or may not be a full-time person. If it's not a full-time person, that's where we come in.
Great. What are some indicators that one needs to bring in a fractional CFO?
So the way we look at it is you need basic information, right? If you don't have basic accounting data, go get an accountant, go get a bookkeeper, hire a controller. You need your basic information. But if you have the information and you're still not sure what to do with it, that's when talking to someone on the finance and strategy side makes sense. And that's where we come in.
Interesting. So what would that look like for a business? What would having the information look like? Using QuickBooks or the detailed spreadsheets? Let's
say you've got QuickBooks set up accurately, right? The information exists.
I like the way you emphasize on the word accurately.
Accurately is
Sounds
key.
Loaded.
It is loaded. We often walk into businesses that say they have QuickBooks, and they do have QuickBooks, but their QuickBooks is all wrong. Now, it could be wrong because it's being input wrong. It could be wrong because it's automated. There's a variety of reasons. It could be being put in wrong. We had this conversation today about one of our clients who has the information in wrong, but we suspect that that's by design because it was cheaper to put it in a way that would be compliant for taxes, but doesn't really provide them with any information. So that information is essentially wrong for business purposes. And I'll give you an example. If you buy something and then you sell it, buy a widget, if you record the expense at whatever time you buy it, and you record the revenue at whatever time you sell it, you have no idea if you're profitable or not, right? If you buy the widget in January and you sell it in March, and you record an expense in January and the revenue in March, you lost money in January, you made money in March, but that's not really true. So that information is essentially meaningless for analytical purposes.
What would this, could we give this widget a name? I want to relate to it a little better.
Laptop computers.
Okay,
right?
so you bought a laptop in March.
Right, you bought 1,000 laptops in January.
And you sold it in June.
And you sold them from March through June, right? And you pay a little bit of overhead. So, if you only record, cash in, cash out, which incidentally could be very helpful for tax purposes. For filing your taxes, they don't necessarily need to match your revenue to your expenses.
So what should someone do in that case? When they sell the laptops, they should record it as like a negative expense?
Essentially what happens is when you buy the laptop, it goes into inventory and you record the expense when you sell it. That's what I would recommend, without knowing any additional details. But the point is that I'm just trying to illustrate how you can have information in QuickBooks, which is even useful for certain purposes and might be wrong by design because it's quicker and easier to just record the expense right away than record it as inventory and then, have the inventory turn into a cost of goods and all this other drama. But so we had a client that we thought may actually have told their bookkeeper to do it the wrong way because it would just be cheaper for them. And they weren't thinking long term. They weren't thinking about growing the business. They were just thinking about, what do I need to hand to my accountant at the end of the year? And for the accountant.
And the accountant's happy.
For tax purposes, that might be sufficient. And if it's cheaper and sufficient, then,
why not? Yeah.
Then people don't necessarily realize. But what happens then, and I'll, thinking of another client, you end up 6 months or 2 years or 5 years down the road, and you've got this hodgepodge of revenue and expenses, and you're just not sure like what relates to what. And it's all in there. And just like, well, I don't have money, but I'm not sure. Do I not have money because I bought too much inventory? Do I not have money because I bought things at expensive prices and sold them for too little? Do I not have money because my inventory got destroyed in a flood? Do I not have money because I borrowed from the bank or Amazon to finance the inventory?
Because if you don't have data, you repeat the same mistakes.
Right. And you can't even try to fix them. So having true data is really the first step. We have gone in, we've worked with startups that had no data, and there it was kind of designing the plan. But, there's a lot of fun work over there. But like when we were talking about running the business, the way it starts is, usually, like we said, you start doing something you love. It's kind of fun and
gets a little sloppy.
Eventually, it snowballs and now you're a business. And now you're like, well, the data that I needed to run a law firm when I was the only lawyer is not the same data I need to know if all my partners or all my associates are profitable. Right. For myself, it's just like, listen, at the end of the day, I took on some profitable stuff, some less profitable stuff. I paid my bills. I move on. Right. When this other thing, it's like, how many hours did the associate bill, and is that enough to justify the salary that I've guaranteed to the partner who's using the associate? And is the partner billing enough hours to keep the associate busy, or is the associate my headache too? So if you don't have proper data, and that's both operational and financial data, then it's tough to make decisions. And
so I could already tell that I'm going to love this episode, because one of my pet topics it's based on a revelation I had at some point in my journey where I realized that I wasn't actually running a business. I was running a hobby because I wasn't writing down this information. And I was just, for the most part, solo, and just, this earned me money. Great. That didn't, whatever it is. The point is, we're bringing in money, and we didn't know what was actually, or I, at the time it was an I didn't know what was actually, our catalyst for growth. Like I had no idea what was going on until I actually started writing down very clear profit loss statements and revenue expenses. And one of the big things that I was taught earlier on from my mentor that I mention all the time, Matti Weisner, I'm still waiting to get him on the show. But one of the things he said is that similar to what you were saying, but what's an expense to the accountant is not necessarily an expense to your business. So an example he gives is, if you have a car that you drive to and from work, can you count it as an expense? I'm not here to give tax advice, but in theory, yes, to some extent, as a tax expense. But as a business expense for your own business development, your own books, in terms of advancing the business and knowing what your expenses are, that's not, if you're gonna have a car anyway, that's not a business expense.
Since we're having fun, I would argue that from your personal life, it's not a business expense, because if you were going to have the car anyway, then on a personal level, you can't view it as a business expense. But from a business perspective, it could be that you would have to buy an executive a car or reimburse somebody else working at the business for mileage or travel. If that's the case, then it could be that
it's not the case. The point here is that this employee, me, would have had the car anyway, so you wouldn't have to buy an executive car.
But that's where I'm pushing back. And if you look at the big picture, forget you. Let's say you were running a big business and you weren't the one running around, it was somebody else running around. Does the business have to pay transportation costs? If the business has to pay transportation costs, let's say the business would have to pay $100 per engagement for somebody to drive. You'd have to pay their mileage. Then in a certain way, it makes sense to look at your car the same way, because you don't want to be missing a crucial expense, right? If you have somebody else doing the job and you pay them, $500 to spend half a day and $100 food credit and $100 for transportation, then you're all in, and then you pay another $500 for editing the video. So your all in cost is $1,200. Okay. And you charge $6,000, you make 8% margins or whatever. Anyway, the point is that your $1,200, if you go and you say, well, it's my car And this is actually an important thing for this solo to CEO type of perspective. If you go and you say, it's my car or it's my time or whatever it is, I don't mind. I would have done it anyway. I don't care. Then you're missing a crucial expense as you grow your business, because you have all these things which you are, yeah, you're right, it's your car. And from the personal perspective, it is your car. But if you donate your car and you don't have the business recognize that expense somehow, whether it's tax deductible or not, is like a totally separate question. Let's say the accountant says it's not tax deductible. If you would have to pay $100 credit on every video, $100 expense on every video for your video guy to get it wherever they need to go, then you need to look at it like that when you're the one doing it also, because otherwise you say, well, my real cost is $1,100 and I only have to charge blank, and it turns out your cost is $1,200. Everything you're looking at, all your data is skewed.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. But I don't think we're disagreeing anyway, because the idea here is that you're saying that there will be a cost. Like if you didn't have a car, there will be a cost for doing that job. So that means for each individual job, if you had a way to document that this job for the car, we had to pay this amount. And in fact, your business can actually pay out to your personal account that money. So it's actually coming out of the account. And every time you use, maybe I should do that. I don't do that right now. We count the car as our personal expense. So that's actually, it's an interesting idea. Like every time I use the car for a shoot, I can pay out from the business to the personal to pay back for the use of the car.
Right. So there's different levels.
It's not something we can expense as a tax expense, though.
Right. But that's really the point. When you start your business, most people start their businesses, especially if it's a service type business. It's like you look at your revenue, you look at whatever your accountant tells you can put against the revenue, and you move on. And that's fine when you're working for yourself. But the big picture, if you want to scale, if you want to grow, you have to recognize what are your true expenses. And if you're donating something, that's whether you reimburse yourself or you count it for taxes is almost beside the point. You have to recognize that the true cost of doing a shoot includes the cost of your car. Because when you hire your next guy, you don't want to get blindsided by that. And honestly, you don't necessarily want to be, if you're looking for a certain target on your margins, you don't want to be ignoring true costs just because you happen to have a car and you happen to be donating it. It's like health insurance in America, right? Health insurance these days more or less will include kids up to age 26. If you have a whole company full of people who are, 23, but you expect those people to grow and stay with your company long term, you don't want to, and you will have to get them health insurance, let's say. So you don't want to ignore the fact that they're growing. Health insurance is a non-issue until a certain point. But if those people are going to grow and you're going to keep them, or if your business model long-term is going to rely on more senior people, then using this and saying, well, we don't have health insurance, that's not an expense we have, you're kind of just obfuscating. And I mean, it might be true today. It's like we had, I think it was a client we were talking with once. It's been a while. It's a year or two since this happened, but now I remember who it was. And they had this worker who worked twice as fast as everyone else. I'm like, that's great. Lucky you. They charge you the same amount. I think it was an hourly role. They charge you the same amount to get twice as much done. But what's your long-term plan? If you want to scale your business, you got to look at what it really costs you to produce this. And the fact that she's doing twice as much work as a normal person, if you don't have a way to replicate her, if you don't have a way to keep her, then you have to look at the real cost, the realistic long-term cost.
So let's take a few steps back, and I want to learn a little bit how you got started with this.
What happened was I used to work in corporate. I had a variety of jobs in corporate finance in the government sector and then bonds in the government sector. And people used to come to me and, family friends, acquaintances would come to me, and I was the guy. I went to business school and I worked in some form of finance. So people would come to me with questions. I got a business. I need help. How would you approach this? How would you approach that? And I got clients, and clients were paying me to help them with strategy, planning, business modeling. And I really enjoyed the work. I felt that it was rewarding, and I kind of had tangible evidence that it was valuable because it was like families. You might have a family running a $15 million business, but they were still paying me out of their pocket out of their next vacation. And that was because they felt that the work I was doing was going to help their business in the long term. And so it was rewarding. I enjoyed it. I wanted to go out and do it full time. I didn't want to quit my full-time job, but I was at a job, wasn't working out. I was at the point where I had to go find a new job. So I'm like, if I got to go find a new job, instead of spending 6 months searching for a job I don't really want as much, let me see if I can make this work. I got my wife to agree. And then I went and decided to do this full time. And yeah, so I called myself a business consultant, and eventually my clients started calling me their CFO. That's the story.
What happened next?
Next, I became friends with a guy. I'll give him a shout out. His name is Bob. Bob's a great guy. He was a former CEO, CFO of a billion-dollar company, and he was retired and doing a little bit of consulting. I met him. We went out for coffee for like a year. Eventually, he's like, if you ever have any extra work that you need help with, give me a call. So at some point, we decided we wanted to try things out, see if we can work together, put them on the website. Eventually, I had a client who I'm on the phone with him. He's like, I'm not really that impressed with you, but that guy on your website, he looks good. I want to talk to him. So that became Bob's first client. And that client stayed with us for a while. And anyway, eventually Bob and I decided we were going to build up the business. And Bob kind of joined as a partner. And then we brought on the other CFOs, and that's the story.
And here we are.
Bob is no longer here. Bob is still alive and well. He's still a good friend. He kind of fell into another business, which was supposed to be part-time, ended up becoming all-consuming, and he took a step back from Imperial. I have a new partner who, incidentally, Bob introduced me to years ago while he was the partner, and this other fellow is now my new partner. We have a whole team. And
so what are some things that you've learned in your own journey of building up your business? It could be regrets and mistakes. It could be near mistakes or just things that you just learned the easy way, maybe.
I think that's something people should be mindful of is use your brain, but also trust your gut. I've hired people who were not the right people. And usually I did it out of desperation. Thankfully, it's not been on the CFO side. So it's been more on the admin operation side. But we've had a variety of people over the years, some better, all good people, but some better for us, some worse for us. But for the most part, when I look back, I had a sense of what the problem was going to be on the interview. But I was usually under the gun, and that's definitely a lesson that I learned, which is if it's not working out, come up with a good plan quick, talk to your HR person, figure out what you're going to do, because if you don't do something quick, nothing's going to change. And even if you do something quick, I don't know that anything is going to change, but don't let things go on too long. And also, if something doesn't feel right in the interview, try not to give in to desperation.
Raise that flag. If you see the flag,
yeah. So that's
don't ignore red flags.
Right.
That's the idea.
I'm not necessarily even talking about people being bad people, but just if you feel, often there's something that's off, or you notice it really, really, really quick, and it doesn't necessarily go away. Other things I've learned. I probably learned a million things. You give me any
maybe something
prompts?
You related to contracts and agreements, like scope creep and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, scope creep. Scope is something that we're constantly working on, trying to come up. The easiest way to bill in a certain way is hourly. But if you want to do value-based pricing, or if you want to not be sending clients timesheets and negotiating on did this quarter of an hour work out, you got to come up with a better plan. And so it's identifying what's valuable to the client and coming up with some other way to bill. Obviously, value-based is great. And for those listening, that's basically where you figure out what is this worth to the client. And then you charge them something based on that. And it doesn't necessarily even have to come out very different from hourly. I would argue that your hourly rate should reflect the value you're providing. It's just not necessarily a great way to bill, especially if you have things that are finite or defined. But yeah, I mean, if you're doing projects, you got to be careful about scope creep. What we found is that if you go in with a low offer, with like a low intro type product service, it's obviously a lot easier for people to commit to, right? Because they're not making a big commitment. They're not making a long-term commitment. But when you go in and you say, hey, we'll do like 10 hours of whatever, then you're already starting down the hourly path, which is not great. And that kind of worked. It got certain demographics, especially those who were more concerned and more nervous, like it got them in, and they often stayed. But it's just not, if you don't like the hourly business, it's not a great place to be. I mentioned that at times we did hourly, and we're working on getting away from that. But it ties back to something I mentioned earlier, which is build your business for the business that you really want to run. And that's an important lesson. It's an important thing to keep in mind. So when I was on my own, I would say, this is $4,000. This is $12,000. This, $10,000 a month, whatever number. And that works when you're on your own, because you know what? If it's more work than you expected, $10,000 a month, I'll make it work. Worst case scenario, eventually you'll tell the client, I got to change the price. It's not necessarily as simple when you're paying somebody else. 20%, 40%, 80%, whatever, some very significant percentage of the revenue that's coming in. And it's certainly not simple if you're paying people an hourly rate and like you don't know how much work they get, right? So if you're billing the client, say $10,000 a month, and you don't know how much work that's going to end up being, that you got to pay your team, right? So in your case, it would be paying your video editors, right? If you have something which could cause a video to be much more expensive, you don't know, and you charge a flat rate, who knows what you're going to end up paying. For us, it's paying the CFO, but it's the same idea. So when we had some people on the team who were basically pushing, and I went along with this and I own this, who said, just bill, if you're paying hourly, just bill hourly. Well, that's great, but the problem is billing hourly is a nightmare, as we mentioned earlier. So for some clients, it's fine. For some clients, it's a nightmare, but either way, it adds a whole level of administration. It's not really it's not a place I want to be. It's often not a great place to be. So, right now we're basically moving back to flat fees on most things, whether it's a flat one-time fee or a flat ongoing fee, X dollars a month, X dollars a week. And we're trying to come up with ways to measure the risk. Sometimes that's just paying a flat fee to our people and letting our team absorb some of the risk. Not necessarily does that always work. Some people on the team come to us because they don't want to be dealing with that risk. So, but still thinking of that as a long-term of like, what are the long-term ramifications of what you are doing? And so we were looking to eliminate a risk. I think we were successful, but we created a whole bunch of other problems.
How did you deal with it?
Well, the problem was the headaches of dealing with hourly. And so what we're doing now is we're going back to flat rate, and we're trying to contain the risk. Whether that is by moving some of it onto the team or using flat rates for things that we've done many, many, many times, where we can come up with a very good, reasonable amount, and then looking at it over a broad view and saying, well, we might lose money on this client, but if we're doing the same thing for 10 clients, and we price it approximately right, we'll make money over the group, even if we lose on one or two. And then building in other things, and this is not the place, but other things to make sure that we're not going to lose, building in other ways to contain the risk.
So I just comment on that. My theory that I've built on flat rate pricing is that there's 3 different ways to price when it comes to flat rate pricing. And all of them are difficult because you're coming up with a number based on variables that you don't even know what's going to end up happening. And especially you're talking about a new client. So you don't know what variables they're going to bring to the table and what unearthly hours of night they're going to call you expecting immediate results. So I find that there's 3 different ways to price. Number 1, there's work-based pricing, meaning how much work it is for me and how much my costs are going to be, and then build a profit on top of that. Number 2 is based on the market. What are other people charging for a similar service? And number 3 is value-based pricing. What is the consumer getting from the service? What level of value, what monetary or quantifiable value are they getting from the service that I'm giving them? And what I find is in a a discovery call or a demo call, whatever it is, when you're having a conversation with a prospect, they want to get you more towards, the first method, the first concept, where it's, how much work is this for you? Like, I'll have a conversation with someone and like $1,000 for $60,000 for 60 videos. That's the conversation I had today. And I was like, $1,000 a video is not bad at all. And like, that was like, I thought I was being generous. And he was saying he was telling me how to price things. He was saying, you should price it based on how many hours you're filming, and then work the editing on top of that. All right. So he's trying to think in the mindset of, how much work is this going to be for me? And I should charge based on that. And I'm thinking in the mindset of, no, we provide a service that is not just top quality not just top quality results that they're getting in their hand, but also the service that comes along with it. It's a white glove VIP service where they don't have to text every few minutes what's going on with the project. And I know the value in that. I know the value in hiring a company that needs to get 60 deliverables done within like 3-4 weeks, and the value in just knowing that you can close your eyes at night and knowing it's going to get done in time. I know there's a huge value in that. And I know that most people, I'm not here to put anyone down, but I know that there is a fear factor that is very, very common amongst the video production, is that you don't know what excuses they're going to cook up to tell you that, sorry, we couldn't make it in time. And we don't do that. I know that is huge value. So if I was going to start discussing based on pricing, like how much it costs me for the equipment, the car to get there, and my editors and what that's going to cost me and all that, I'll come up with whatever number it is, but then it's not necessarily representative of what I'm giving them. So that's what I find, that the client is going to try and get you towards what does it cost you? And then you're going to try and get him towards, wait, but do you realize the value in what I'm giving you? And then the idea is that you meet somewhere in the middle, which is going to be similar to what the market charges for that type of thing.
Or a challenge with value-based pricing is, if you have other players, and you alluded to this at the end, if you have other players in the market who are charging using some of these other methods, then if they're also providing a comparable quality product or service, then it might be worth this, but still, if you can get it for half price somewhere else, then why wouldn't you do that?
Absolutely. You can't be priced out of the market, for sure. The question is, what does comparable and similar mean? So if you're providing a service that is well above the norm of what people provide, and there are certain known issues with your industry that you address and obliterate, and you have a reputation for that, then nothing's comparable anymore.
100%. And that's really what you're selling. You're selling the peace of mind of not having to make those calls, because anyone can make the video. But you're selling maybe a higher quality video, or maybe you're selling the same video, but it'll be done on time and without you having to think about it. And your true client, the client who's going to pay you that price, is the one who cares about that. And by charging an amount that's more, let's say, than your run-of-the-mill place, you're going to price some people out, but that's okay. I mean, that's not your client. They don't want to pay for what you're really selling, which is videos plus peace of mind. They just want the video. So let them go to the person who'll charge them half price and give them the video and get it, 3 months late and whatever.
So how do you get yourself out there? How do you get known?
I find people like you that make really good videos about us. But my null hypothesis was that this was primarily a networking business. I'm not sure if I still believe that. It's definitely still a major part of getting out there, getting to know the people who need our service. But more than that, it's getting to know the people who know those people. So that's networking with other business professionals who are going to bump into a need, who aren't going to want to fill it, right? Let's say an attorney, for example. An attorney doesn't want to be the CFO, right? So if an attorney doesn't want to be the CFO, they'll be happy. We want the attorney to think of us. We want to be top of mind with the attorney, and we want them to know that we're going to make them look really good. And so think attorneys, accountants, marketing agencies, other people touching the same clients. You got to find the people in the right market, and you got to explain to them why what you're doing is going to make them look really good, and why when they recognize a need, they should send the client to you. And that's a variety of things. including what we mentioned, as well as business coaches, EOS implementers, IT companies. It depends. Other CFO firms, who, when they bump into a specific need, which is not for them, we want them to think of us. So there's that's what I would call networking. We've also hired companies that help find leads, not just find leads and book them on our calendar. Again, my null hypothesis was that wasn't the way to go. So my sales trainer, Jeff, told me or sales trainer and sales coach, he said, I can teach you how to sell, but who are you going to sell to? You got to find more people to sell to. And so we've engaged with a number of different companies, and that's been another channel of leads. What I find is that, and this has just been my experience, when we've paid people for a specific number of leads, you're going to get us X leads a month, those usually have not been successful. But when we've paid people for, if you get us a lead that fits into criteria XYZ, and we pay per lead, those have tended to be more successful, even though there's lots of arguments for why paying someone a flat fee, and they know that they're going to get paid and they just have to go do good work. That should work. And we've found that has been less successful. But we've had a number of different companies, and that there is a channel there. And we're starting to dabble in some other more traditional online marketing. We're on LinkedIn, but that's more to support the networking. It's really part of, I would call, a sales flywheel. So people who engage with us from any channel, whether it's networking, online marketing, the lead gen companies, whatever it is, once they engage with us, then they follow us on LinkedIn, hopefully. And, that becomes a way to just kind of stay top of mind, both with our networking contacts as well as real, potential companies.
So do you ever use video for your marketing? I have to ask, I'm a video guy.
So we have a webinar series. And our webinar series deals with a mixture of financial related topics as well as other topics from things, top disciplines of interest to our potential client base. So
is that like an opt-in offer kind of thing? You sign up and you get a free webinar?
No. I mean, people do sign in and they do get the free webinars, but those webinars we do them usually around once a month. So it's just an ongoing education series, and we want to be thought of as thought leaders. We want to use that as a tool to stay in front of people. And we want to educate people about what we do. And so that is definitely another thing that we do. Something interesting I've found is that the people who speak on the webinars tend to also, not always, but tend to become referral sources. But back to your question on, do we do video marketing? So the webinar is a form of video, but I don't think that's really video marketing. We're working on turning some of the short sound bites into clips that we can use that's for social media. I mean, we're trying to set up thank you for your help with this. We're working on a YouTube short channel. We also want to put the stuff on LinkedIn, WhatsApp, etc., so that the people who are following us already can see more of this stuff in insights and bite-sized pieces. That's kind of our experience so far with video marketing.
But you've never used video ads, like promo videos and that kind of stuff?
No. I like video. I would like to have video, but when I think of I'm always very resistant, and maybe this is because I'm a conservative type of person. I'm very resistant to spend marketing dollars because, again, my null hypothesis, my theory is that the primary way to find clients is through networking. So making some video to clients and saying, hey, we're amazing. I don't really think that's going to impress a client. Not because I don't think video works. I just don't think that for this type, I don't think we're going to establish trust. We're a trust-based service. I don't think we're going to establish trust by the video. Now, if we can put on a video series of education for advisors, that would be incredibly valuable. And that's what our webinar series is. And we're working on other things along those lines, whether they're video or in person, to educate our target referral sources, because we create the trust with them and they already have the trust with the client. But a short promo video saying, hey, we're amazing. I guess client testimonials might be something. We definitely do that. So if we had client testimonials on video, that I see as being something to help build trust and credibility. But it's not the type of thing, certainly not something I would expect to convert. Like even our Google ad, right? We're starting to do pay-per-click. The pay-per-click, we're not expecting to convert any clients from the pay-per-click. That's not why we're doing it. We're doing it because we want to retarget them and like over time build trust. And so the pay-per-click is really just like a magnet almost to get them to the website so we can track them and add them to the...
There's, without a doubt, the promo video is not a standalone solution. If you have nobody telling people that your service is good, it's something that needs to work in tandem with other things. So yeah, I agree with that. It's definitely, you're not going to establish trust just by showing them a video. You enforce trust, or you enforce the client consumer fit based on them seeing the video, but it's not going to be a replacement for referral. I think referrals is probably the most powerful way to engage in new customers because people trust their friends and everybody sniffs marketing from a mile away. No one wants to be sold to. So yeah, the purpose of video is just to enforce the other forms of marketing. That's not to say that it doesn't help. Like if you did a video ad and people saw the ad and they connected to it, some people will still go for that, even if they don't know anyone that works with them. And we've gotten some clients that weren't necessarily referrals. They've just, they've seen our ad and they checked out our stuff. They like what we do. But yeah, definitely the most powerful form of marketing. If that works for you also without a video, that's also great. But what you're doing is the educational content-based marketing is a very powerful form of marketing. Yeah. I mean, that's what we're doing here with the podcast.
Yeah. Well, you're doing great.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. What are some tips you would give to businesses maybe that aren't ready to hire a CFO? What would be some CFO tips that you would give them?
So something we touched on before, have numbers, know your numbers. If you don't know your numbers, you can't really do long-term planning. You can't, if you don't have numbers, you don't understand it. It's very difficult to understand your business. Now that might work for a one-person business, but as you grow, you get 10, 20 people, like things start getting complicated and you're missing a very important tool. And I'm not necessarily opposed to taking risk. I am a conservative person, but you can take risks, but understand the risks that you're taking. So you can borrow money. I'm not opposed to borrowing money, but if you're borrowing money, know how much money you're borrowing, know what interest rate you're going to have to pay, know why you're borrowing that money, because something that we see is people just land themselves. They kind of just borrow money because it's easy. They found a way. Amazon lends them money. PayPal lends them money. And before you know it, you're just in a ton of debt that you really don't understand. And like, why are you there? So sometimes you're there because of some structural problem. Sometimes you're there because it was easy and you use that money to invest in a bunch of inventory, which maybe that wasn't the smartest inventory to buy. And maybe you would have focused and bought the right inventory if you had a limited amount of money. So you're borrowing money at 18% interest or 24%, whatever the number is, or potentially a lot worse. And so really understand your numbers, be smart about debt. So again, that doesn't mean don't use it, but use it judiciously. Understand what you're doing and why. And if something's not right, don't wait till it becomes a catastrophe. I mean, we come into businesses that have been making big mistakes for a really long time. We work with plenty of businesses that are doing great and they're looking to grow and take it to the next level and they're making lots of money. And we also work with businesses that are in trouble. And some of those businesses that were in trouble, the signs were there for a long time. You were losing money consistently. You're borrowing money to fund salaries for employees you could never afford. Like, these things happen, and don't wait till you're in big trouble, because it doesn't mean you can't be saved, but it's going to be more painful. And you're digging a hole that you don't have to be digging. And my advice would be not to dig that hole.
Don't dig that hole in the first place. And if you do dig that hole, don't put your head in and cover it up with sand.
Right. But I mean, the way that we look at businesses that are in that situation, or businesses that are healthy, but it's the way I like to look at it is you say, what are your revenues? And we touched earlier in this conversation about how to look at revenues and expenses. But what are your revenues? What are your expenses? Is there any money left, right? On your, what I would call cost of good expenses, your direct expenses, your expenses involved in producing the main service. And then once you understand how much money you have left, then you can look at that and say, okay, the rest goes to paying marketing expenses. Now, marketing might be an investment in the future, but if you have no cash today, how are you paying for that? So understanding, can I afford to invest in the future? Because if you can't, then you're in a tough situation, but at least you should know it. You should realize what's going on. Then you'll make your decisions accordingly. But the money you have left after revenue, what I would call cost of goods, the cost to provide your core service, that money goes to marketing. That money goes to pay the interest on the money you've borrowed, right? That money goes to pay overhead, including probably your salary as the business owner. And then whatever's left is profit. Or there might be some other things, but what's left after the overhead is profit. So understand, are you making enough? Are you making enough after revenue and cost of goods to be able to afford all that other stuff, right? If you can't afford your salary, it's another good one. If you can't afford your salary, your business is basically losing money. You're not breaking even. We spoke with a business once. They were running a $4 million business. The CEO, $4 million in revenue, and an $18 million building. The CEO was taking no money out of the business. So he wasn't getting paid. So basically, to run a business like that, you got to pay him $100,000, $200,000. Business was basically losing $200,000 and was being absorbed by the CEO who wasn't getting paid. They were sitting on millions of dollars of inventory that they weren't keeping track of, so they didn't even know it was there. But, I saw the room. There was a lot. And they had an $18 million building, which they basically owned. I think they had $1 million mortgage. So it's $17 million in equity. Do you recognize that you're losing money? Do you recognize that you're not producing anything? You're just tying up this building and doing nothing. You could sell the business. There were probably changes they could make. There are a variety of things. But understand what's going on and get it from the right perspective.
Wow. That's a good example of a business that is just not keeping track, and they could be so much more profitable.
Yeah. I mean, for them, they could have sold a lot of their inventory. They could have sold the inventory and paid down the debt. They could have sold the inventory and bought a new business, something else that would produce profit. I mean, there was a lot of things they could do, but they were sitting on it. It was there for 30 years, and they just sold a few pieces from inventory that's sitting there for 30 years. I forget the numbers they throw around. Maybe 20-30% is the cost that you got to assume that inventory. You have to add 30%. Or maybe think of it as if inventory is worth $100, you're probably spending $30 a year to maintain it, between things that break, things that get old, the space, the interest, and, with interest rates where they are, maybe that number is now 40%. And these guys were staying on inventory for 30 years or more.
So what does a business lose out on by not hiring a CFO? Because I imagine there is a price associated with it. I imagine it's not cheap. So what would you tell them? Meaning, why should they be hiring a CFO? What would they gain more than the actual expense that they're spending?
The way I like to look at it is, if you're not getting what you need and you need that to run your business, then it's something that you need. Now, how do you measure helping client not get into a bad debt deal, right? They're going to borrow $1 million, and you help them recognize that the loan they're looking at is going to cost them an extra $100,000 a year because they misunderstood it, or because they didn't have their financial statements set up in a way where a bank would look at them, and you help them avoid that and get it done right. So how do you measure that? There's a million different things that you can benefit from not having it. So the way that I look at it is, when a business reaches the point where they know they're not getting the insight and they feel that they're missing out, that could be they feel that they're sitting on too much inventory and don't have an approach. They're going into debt deals and they feel like they may not be doing the smartest thing. They're taking on projects that they feel are not smartest, but they're not comfortable with the way things are going. And they sense that they're leaving money on the table. They're making mistakes. I mean, I'll tell you, I spoke with someone recently. They told me, I decided to do X. I had these one or two reasons. they were good reasons, but it was a bad move because I got involved in X, it stopped me from being able to take on a bunch of other much smarter, much more profitable things, right? Everything has an opportunity cost. So if you're sitting there and you're trying to figure out, should I raise my prices? Should I extend credit to a client? Like, which is smarter, which is going to cost me more, which has worse or better long-term ramifications. If you're making decisions and you're not comfortable with the decisions you're making, that's where you want to have somebody else at the table. And when I describe our avatar of like who our ideal client is, it's someone who's running a successful business, has the data we discussed earlier, right? They've got a functioning accounting department, and the CEO kind of feels that I'm the CFO. It's not a money thing. I mean, it will cost them money, but they're not coming to us because we're going to save them they're just like, this is not the right role for me, right? I'm supposed to be the CEO. I'm good at motivating people. I'm good at doing the thing, whatever the thing is, marketing, recruiting, lawyering. And I don't want this other role. I don't want to be the CFO. And that's where clients come. And I don't think they're looking at how many dollars is this going to save me. Does it save them dollars? Sure. Like I said, imagine you go for a bank loan and the bank is comfortable with what comes in instead of not comfortable, right? So now you get to borrow money at 1% cheaper, right? 1% on $1 million is $10,000. 1% on $5 million is $50,000. $5 million is not a crazy loan for a nice sized business, right? Imagine that you come in and they give you a slightly lower rate because they're comfortable, or they give you a loan and then you don't have to go borrow from PayPal or Amazon or a loan shark, which by the way, people do. They just don't call them loan sharks. But so what's the value? What's the value of recognizing a risk before it blows up in your face and coming up with a way to avoid it? What's the value of introducing you to an employment attorney so that you don't make mistakes that you're going to regret later? What's the value of that introduction? Well, it's winning a lawsuit or not having a lawsuit. So, that's my answer. My answer is I don't think it should be benchmarked against dollars. That being said, I mean, we just went into a client who is losing a significant amount of money every month. Let's call it $500,000 a year, right? It's not going to cost us $500,000 to help solve their problems. Hopefully their problems are solvable. We're working on it. If the problems aren't solvable, well, they can pack it in and at least stop losing money, right? And if their problems are solvable, which I believe they are, we can help solve it. It's not going to cost them $500,000. And I mean, we all know that. I mean, us and the client, right? Whatever happens is going to be for a lot less than $500,000. But that's not, I wouldn't say we usually go in to solve problems like where people are losing lots of money and we turn it all around. But that is a scenario where it is quantifiable. Often it's not.
What are your thoughts on hiring help outside of the business for people to come in and help you out with things in the processes of running business?
So I'm a big fan of that. As I mentioned earlier, I brought on my partner, right? And part of the reason why I thought it was great to have him was he was a person who had decades more of experience than I had, lots of wisdom. And I love learning from people who know a lot and are looking to share. And anyway, one day my partner says, Gershon, you're great, but you got to get sales training. So I went and I hired Jeff, and Jeff taught me a process. Different people have different processes, but Jeff taught me how to do it, and it was amazing. I can now run a sales call. I can do it in a different type of way. And that's an example. But just in general, I'm a big fan of bringing in the people you need to help you so that you can do your business. And one of the first hires I made was a couple of interns when I was on my own. And I said, you know what? I'm not the best at everything, and not everything is the best use of my time, even if I am good at it. And that was, so I brought on someone to help me with some of the more basic finance work. And then ultimately I brought on people to do marketing. I'm not the best at marketing. Marketing is not the best use of my time. So we brought on other people to help, and we hire outside people and we hire inside people. It depends on the need, depends on the situation. But yeah, we have an IT company. We've got a variety of things. We're always looking to, and this is actually something I should mention. This might be like another question or thing, but I got to work every day and I'm trying to figure out what can I not do, right? As you grow your business, the question, like, you might be the best at everything, and I'm sure you're really good at a lot of stuff. And for anyone listening, you might be the best at everything, but you can't grow business if you're doing everything. So my mentality is every day is, who can I give this to that can do it really, really good? And so that started, as I mentioned earlier, with bringing on Bob, right? Bob was good. He was experienced. He could do the work, right? I brought on people to help with marketing. We brought more people on, but I was still kind of managing client relationships. My new partner is working on starting to manage those client relationships. And there's always stuff for me to do. Hiring new marketing vendors is something I spend a lot of my time on now. My new partner is helping with that. My new partner, Ken, is helping with that as well. So it's really, what is it that you can do best? Where can you add the most value? And really understanding the big picture. If you want it to be a real business and not, as you alluded to earlier, not be a job, not be a hobby, it needs to be something where the business can run without you. So originally, I was the main worker. I was the main marketer. I was the main person running the business. Eventually, I gave away a lot of the marketing, day-to-day marketing stuff. I'm still doing some of the marketing strategy. Eventually, I'll give that away. But to grow the business, we needed other people to do the work. So we brought in other people to do the work. I was still managing the relationships. We're building up having other people take over relationships. We have somebody else working on sales, other people working on networking. So each of the pieces of the business is always trying to take what I know and the experience I have and find other people who either have the experience or people who we can train so that they can go and kind of flourish. And then again, like I said, there's always more going on in the business. There'll always be stuff for me to do.
And why is all that so important?
Because one person can't do everything themselves. You can't be everything. You probably don't do everything best, but even if you do everything best, do you want to be the bottleneck in your business? I don't want to be the bottleneck in my business. And if I don't want to be the bottleneck, I need to empower other people to do the critical.
Because the goal is to scale. You can't scale yourself.
Correct.
Awesome. Amazing. So now if someone wanted to get in touch with Imperial Advisory, what's the best way to do it?
Gershon at imperialgrp.com. That's Imperial Group, but no vowels. So Gershon at imperialgrp.com. You can also reach me on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Anyway, thank you very much for taking the time out and coming on the show over here. And thank you for watching.